what we said on the previous podcast when we addressed this issue, we knew that with South Africa taking on both the United States and the Zionist state, because quite frankly they're joined at the hip, despite the current quote unquote so-called acrimony between Joseph Robinette Biden and Benjamin Netanyahu. These two nations are joined at the hip, and to attack one is essentially to attack the other in the eyes and in the minds of the current people who are running the American empire. So we said at that time that the general formula is, when they want to punish a nation, first, or let's say punish a nation, or sometimes it may be the leader of a nation like Fidel Castro, Saddam Hussein, or Muammar Gaddafi, or Hugo Chavez, or Vladimir Putin, or whomever. First they go through the process of demonization. They demonize them. They vilify them, because what they're doing is they are creating the conditions or the consciousness in the minds of the gullible American body politic, that when they do in fact take actions, that the minds of the people will already be distorted. And of course, since this is an African nation, given the dominance of the mass-based philosophy of white supremacy, it doesn't take much for them to convince the average American citizen that South Africa is guilty. They're guilty just because they're African nation. They got the nerve to be living and then challenging both the Zionist state and the United States for these actions, this genocidal campaign and these war crimes, genocide by starvation, by 500-pound bombs, 2,000-pound bombs, et cetera, et cetera. So we knew that the demonization would be cranked up based on this bill that had been introduced in the House by John James and Jared Moskowitz. The demonization is usually followed by some form of economic warfare. And South Africa does have bilateral relations with the United States through the Africa Growth Act and through other means in terms of the amount of trade that takes place between the two nations. And a lot of times they will attempt to punish a particular country by imposing sanctions on them. And generally, countries in Africa have been targeted for sanctions probably more than countries, any other on any other continent. And so they will try those. That's the first step: demonization, then economic warfare, which can take various forms, and then finally, the final objective would be regime change, to actually remove the current government that's engaging, in this practice of trying to bring justice to the world. And that's basically what the government of South Africa is doing. They're trying to bring justice to a situation, where people are literally being slaughtered simply because they are who they are on the land that they have. No different from the genocide that took place in this land here in the United States against the indigenous people. The American empire is a country built on stolen land by stolen labor. And I suppose if you had some kind of organization, international organization at that time, someone could have, for example, Haiti or somebody could have raised, the issue, at an international court of justice or an international criminal court or United Nations Security Council, et cetera, et cetera. So this is the first part, the first phase, the demonization, and And what happened is you had an article appeared in the Wall Street Journal. Okay, so they go to these empire media publications, like the New York Times and the Washington Post and CNN and Fox or whomever, Wall Street Journal. And the journal said that that Israel was the actions of Azania, of South Africa, of bringing Israel or the Zionist state before the International Court of Justice constituted an hostile act against a U.S. ally. Now, those are very strong words coming from an organization like the Wall Street Journal. A hostile act. Taking someone to court, accusing them of genocide, is considered a hostile act. Now, in a just world, a hostile act would be the actual committing of the genocide. That would actually, in a just world, in a world that was right side up, that's what you would see. So based on the source that we've read, the Wall Street Journal pointed out on March 24th that South Africa's legal case against Israel before the International Court of Justice over the war on the Gaza Strip and other developments are causing Congress to re-examine Washington's ties with what they call our non-friends in Pretoria. So they're already they're accusing the government there of not being friendly to the United States. This is all part of the propaganda campaign. In an opinion piece, the Wall Street Journal editorial board echoed a similar statement by Israel and considered that South Africa held hands with Hamas in January and charged Israel with genocide at the International Court of Justice. South Africa has repeatedly said that they did not support the October 7th attack that was launched by Hamas, and they have repeatedly called for Hamas to release the hostages that they've held. But here they're saying what? That they are holding hands with Hamas. On March 21st, the U.S.-South Africa Bilateral Relations Review Act passed the House Foreign Affairs Committee 26-13 with bipartisan support. 36-13. Okay. So the committee has, I believe it has 50 members. 27 are Republicans and 23 are Democrats. So 36-13, that's what, 39. So everybody obviously didn't vote, but with the fact that they got 36 votes, which is 13 more than the total members of the total number of Democrats, shows you that there are a large number of Democrats who actually support this. Now, Gregory Meeks, who we've discussed on previous occasions, is actually the ranking Democrat on this particular committee. So, I'm sure he's holding hands. I'm sure Meeks is holding hands with James and Moskowitz. And it just goes to show you, when you are just voting for people because of their melanin content and not based on what they really stand for, then you are actually just being extremely gullible. I mean, we have to get beyond this thing. Well, we got a black representative. Yeah, who do you have? What does the person represent? What does the person stand for in terms of truth, justice, righteousness in the world? Okay. The bill mentioned that South Africa has a history of siding with malign actors. Okay, so Meeks was one of the first members of Congress that started this whole conversation around malign actors, right? Which include the Palestinian resistance movement, Hamas, Russia, and China. So here you have probably all of the leading demonized forces in the world, with the exception of North Korea and Iran, and probably Assad of Syria. It said there's a history of siding with, right, these malign actors. The legislation was passed while South African Foreign Minister Naledi Pandor was in Washington, D.C. as part of a progressive speaking tour. The Wall Street Journal's editorial board said that Pandor is known for her anti-Israeli foreign policy stance, adding that the top diplomat has warned South African citizens fighting with the Israeli occupation forces or alongside them in the Gaza Strip will face arrest upon returning home. So once again, here they are singling out our strong sister, this strong, in my opinion, the strongest sister on the continent since Mama Winnie Madikizela Mandela, and they're singling her out, and they're criticizing her for saying that if you're a South African citizen and you are fighting, you are in Gaza fighting with the Israeli Defense Forces committing genocide, that if you return to South Africa, you would be arrested.
Now, let me ask you this.
Go ahead.
They're criticizing her for saying that, but doesn't the United States have a law against American citizens going to fight with a foreign nation in a war?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. As a matter of fact, they have what is known as enemy combatants. And Barack Obama, when Barack Obama signed the 2012 National Defense Authorization Act, it had a clause in it which said that American citizens could be arrested and held in indefinite detention without due process if they are accused of aiding or assisting a foreign government, liberation movement, or anything that they consider to be an enemy of the American empire. So yes, you're absolutely correct. And look, they are trying to extradite Julian Assange, right, from the United Kingdom to the United States to try him on various charges related to the information that he released via WikiLeaks that exposed the United States committing war crimes in Iraq. And the punishment that they could impose upon Julian Assange for simply printing material, releasing information, includes the death penalty. And the reason why the courts in the United Kingdom haven't released him, because the United States and the United Kingdom have an extradition treaty. The reason why the courts in the United Kingdom have released him is because they want guarantees from the United States that he won't be tried and given the death penalty. So, but he's actually, just like a lot of our elderly political prisoners, he's already suffering, immensely. He could wind up dying anyway via medical neglect or some other things. We see these things, pop up time from time because
I always thought that's one guy that I feel like he probably has some type of trigger to where if he dies, it's probably a whole lot more information on servers somewhere that nobody else can penetrate.
Yeah,
gonna be released to the public.
Oh, I think you're absolutely correct. I think you're correct on that. But yeah, to your point regarding laws, against in engaging in what the United States calls hostile acts, South Africa has a similar law. So it applies to the United States, but it doesn't apply. Just like all of the people in the United States, is holding, in the prison, in Guantanamo Bay in Cuba. Okay, so this is what you have, and in the text of the bill, they go through all of these ridiculous statements. On October 14th, President Cyril Ramaphosa of South Africa accused Israel of genocide in a statement during a pro-Palestinian rally. This man has no freedom of speech in his own country, right? I mean, you can. On October 17th, Foreign Minister Naledi Pandor accepted a call with Hamas leader Ismail Haniyeh. I mean, this is what passes for legislation, in this country. But it's part of the process. It's part of the process. So the government, the African National Congress government, President Ramaphosa, Foreign Minister Dr. Naledi Pandor, and others, even those who are in the opposition parties like Julius Malema, people who are in the Pan-Africanist Congress, the other Congresses, the DA, the Democratic Alliance, forget them. They would probably be the government that the United States would try to install if they could pull off regime change. But everybody's going to have to pull together. Just like we say at the closing of our Kwanzaa programs, Harambe. Harambe is a Kiswahili for pull together. All of these political parties, they're going to have to put whatever differences they have aside, because they're coming after South Africa, period. And you might say, well, they're just going after the ANC. You believe that if you want to. And this is one situation where, when people talk about, well, we need multi-party states, you could say that the fact that Cuba only had one party saved Cuba, from the Cuban government from being overthrown and for Cuba being turned into a U.S. neo-colony. The same way with Secretaries, the PDG, Progressive Democratic Party of Guinea. Okay, right. They had when the Portuguese attempted to invade Guinea, they had the regular army and the People's Militia. Why? Everybody was organized around one organization: self-reliance, self-determination, and self-defense for Guinea. And so, what's going to happen in South Africa is people are going to have to put their differences aside, because the American empire is coming. Now, Joe Biden is in a tough situation. This might not be something that he wants to do during this election, because that would be he already has enough problems within his Democratic Party faction, with all of the people who are up in arms about the U.S. complicity and support of the genocide that is being carried out by the Zionists in Gaza. And so this could be another problem. He may not want to sign this particular bill, or he may try to delay it. He may try to rally his forces. They don't have enough people in the House to stop it, but they could stop it in the Senate. I don't think this is something that he wants, a bill that he wants to sign, even though he may personally want to sign it. Politically, he may not be able to, but this is something that we are staying abreast of, and we just wanted to bring it to the attention of our viewers that, this is where the current status is. It passed the House Foreign Relations Committee. Now we'll go to the full House for a vote. There's no doubt that it will pass the full House, because you already have Democrats who are supporting this already. Okay. So, what happens in the Senate, whether Schumer and those can stonewall it or whatever for a while and then pass it. But hey, We just wanted to make our audience aware of it. Okay, one other thing that we wanted to discuss that happened this week is the vote in the United Nations Security Council that established a 2-week ceasefire in Gaza. Now, it doesn't say it's 2 weeks, but it says the language says that there should be a ceasefire established during the month of Ramadan. Ramadan, I believe, began on March the 10th and it ends on April the 9th. I know that it ends on April the 9th. And so what happened is that on March the 25th, the UN Security Council passed a resolution demanding an immediate ceasefire for the month of Ramadan, the immediate and unconditional release of hostages, and the urgent need to expand the flow of aid into Gaza. 14 countries voted for the resolution, and the Biden-Harris administration, bearing the pressure, abstained instead of its usual veto to protect the Zionist state. Israel Army Radio reported shortly before the council meeting started that Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu would cancel a planned delegation to Washington if the U.S. did not veto the resolution. Can you imagine this? I mean, think about this. Here is a tiny country in another part of the world saying that, demanding that the United States veto a UN resolution. I mean, how insane is that? And the only surprise is that the United States didn't bow down and do what Netanyahu wanted. Washington had been averse to the word ceasefire earlier in the 6-month war in the Gaza Strip, and had used its veto power to shield Israel as it retaliated against Hamas for an October 7th attack. So the U.S., I think, has vetoed 3 ceasefire resolutions. And then they came up with a gimmick resolution, which Russia and China vetoed, but they wouldn't even use the word ceasefire. They were so afraid of offending the Zionist lobby, which funds so many politicians in both wings of the corrupt two-party system, that they were afraid. Here is the world's supposedly preeminent superpower, the only superpower they think, and they were afraid to use this word. The first time they actually used it was on the Biden-Harris administration actually used the word was during a speech in Selma on March the 3rd by the Vice President Kamala Harris. And she called for I think a 6-week ceasefire. When she initially gave the speech, she said, "We are calling for a ceasefire." So that was the first time they actually used the word. The audience broke into a loud applause, but they didn't realize that she wasn't talking about a permanent ceasefire. And she was only talking about for a period of time, which this particular resolution also is doing. U.S. Ambassador to the UN, Linda Thomas-Greenfield, said a ceasefire can begin immediately with the release of the first hostage. So we must put pressure on Hamas to do just that. So you can see where she's angling right here. I'm not sure that this is the intention of the elected 10. Okay, so the resolution was put forth by the elected 10 members of the Security Council. The Security Council has 15 members, 5 are permanent members, and then you have rotating members from the General Assembly that sit on the Security Council for periods of time, and they're called the elected 10. So I'm not sure that this was their intention, but the reality is this. Hamas is supposed to release hostages, and the Zionist state can resume its genocidal campaign in 2 weeks. That's basically what this is saying. But the other thing is this. A lot of people say, well, it is significant, and I'll explain why I think it's significant. But is the UN Security Council has different levels of resolutions, and this resolution wasn't presented as a binding resolution, meaning that it is international law, which can be enforced, by employing UN troops in an area. So Thomas Greenfield, right, the latest, neo-colonial lackey of the black face of imperialism, was quick to point out, as she tried to calm down the Netanyahu Likud faction in Israel, to say the resolution is non-binding. She said it's a non-binding resolution. So essentially, it's like the ruling by the International Court of Justice, which, even though it establishes quote unquote law, it's establishing a law which cannot be enforced. The enforcement arm of the International Court of Justice is the United Nations Security Council. And that's why some people are saying that the veto power of the 5 permanent members needs to be eradicated. It needs to be removed. Because how can you have 14 members voting for something and one can vote against it and stop it? Okay, so that's the situation. Now, why is it significant? Because, in my opinion, it continues to build the case against the Zionist state. And at some point, we hope that these countries like China and Russia and other countries, Brazil, other countries, will take further actions. Now, let me give you one example of how these legal rulings, even though they can't be enforced, can be effective. Lawyers in the Netherlands said, after the January 25th ICJ ruling, which found that the accusation by South Africa that Israel was committing genocide was plausible, there was a ruling by a body in the Netherlands which said that based on this ruling, the Netherlands can no longer supply materials, weapons, and parts. Now, I think they supply parts to Israel. They have a manufacturer there that supplies parts to Israel to keep the F-16 Fighting Falcons and the 8 F-35s flying. And so now, based on the ruling in the International Court of Justice, the Netherlands, and this is just one small example, the Netherlands can no longer supply these parts to keep these jets flying. Now, I'm sure they have alternative sources, I would think, but I don't know. So what that says to me is that someone can go to court, someone in the legislature of China, or in the legislature of Brazil, or in the legislature of somewhere else, another country somewhere in the world, can use this ruling to say, we have to stop supplying blank, 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 or based on Israel's violation of these rulings, that we're demanding that you break diplomatic relations with Israel. So it does provide some legal foundation for some other types of action, if these countries, have the wherewithal to actually do it. Because, in my opinion, it's past time to all of these UN, all of these votes, and all these other things. And the votes are important. They are establishing a legal precedent, but the legal precedent has to be backed up with some action that's beyond, these things that come out of the UN International Court of Justice, or if they ever get Netanyahu and his clique charged at the International Criminal Court, the enforcement has to come in other forms. These countries, for example, could decide that they're going to put sanctions on Israel, just like the United States put sanctions on, Zimbabwe. They put sanctions on Ethiopia. They put sanctions on various countries, threatening sanctions, on, Ghana, for example, because of, legislation that they say, these things that are part of your culture are not part of ours. So you can't tell us what to do. So, sanctions on Cuba, sanctions on Venezuela, sanctions on Nicaragua, all of these countries. So it's significant if countries act on it. Otherwise, it's just another piece of legislation or another court ruling or another law that's not enforced.
Yeah, you're right. It's just it shows who really has the power. That's what these courts really show me. They show which countries really have the power and which countries don't. And until the other countries decide that enough is enough, then it'll be the same. It'll be the same situation, the same things happening. If you look at the previous bill, one of the things that was mentioned on that bill was that South Africa supported Hamas, which was a proxy. They called them a proxy of Iran.
Mm.
The United States killed an Iranian general through a drone strike on his own soil. Well, he was leaving the tarmac of an airport, and they blew him up. And Iran retaliated by, blowing up some United States military, equipment or stations or what have you. But if Iran was to strike a United States general through a drone strike on American soil, what do you think the response would be?
All out war.
All out war. Either all out war, or they would probably be close to the brink of using a nuclear weapon on Iran.
Yeah, I think that's the kind of war that would probably require them to use nuclear weapons.
So these courts ruling or voting on a ceasefire, really all it shows is that the countries around Israel don't possess the power to stop and make Israel ceasefire. That's really what it boils down to. If it has to go to a court system, that means you don't have the power. The United States is not going to go to the UN and ask for a vote when it has to do business with any other country as it pertains to war.
Exactly.
They're going to move as it wants to move as it pertains to war. Around Israel, they're surrounded by multiple Arab countries in that region, most of whom have been neutralized due to United States military campaigns, which have been motivated by an Israeli agenda for that specific reason, to weaken those countries around them, so that when this day came, the opposition that they would face would be minuscule, which is why the United States continues to push this Iran theory so that they can then try to neutralize probably the last uh, capable country that would be able to combat Israel and what they're doing. But you have other countries with Arab populations like Saudi Arabia, Qatar, who are not stepping up and saying, "Hey, we're going to stop this from happening."
Right. Exactly.
So I agree with what you said. Until you have other countries who are willing to step up and force a ceasefire, then this is nothing more than a symbolic gesture.
Yeah. Symbolic gesture, but I I don't want to underestimate the the movement in in the right direction, because this,
Well, it could be a domino.
yeah,
It could be a domino that can fall, that can cause future action to take place. And sometimes, politically, people have to become politically exhausted before they're willing to take it to the level where they will have to use force.
yeah. I mean, think about this, brother. Almost given where we perceive the government of South Africa to be, the African National Congress, from Mandela. Uh, I don't want to put him, Thabo Mbeki in that same category, Zuma, and then Ramaphosa. I don't think 10 years ago we could have conceived of South Africa taking on the United States and the Zionist state. I don't I couldn't have conceived of it. Okay. And so the fact that they moved to that position is in many ways incredible. And perhaps it was just a matter of getting the people with the right consciousness in positions like, Dr. Pandora. And it's no accident they keep singling this sister out. I mean, here they are talking about this sister in US, in a bill, legislation in the United States Congress is singling this sister out. Okay. And so, with them, it's always the people who represent the threat to their hegemony. Like
Mhm.
a Marcus Garvey, like a Malcolm X, right? Like a Patrice Lumumba, right? Like a Kwame Nkrumah. The they they try to nip the potential in the bud. Okay. That's why Hoover said, especially the youth, right? And
Mhm.
now look at our youth, right? We're a lot of them, not all of them, but look at them. But many of them are demonstrating and awakening. They were in Senator Warnock's church protesting, group of students from the Atlanta University Center. So I mean, some things are happening. Uh, so I think we recognize the movement. We understand this. This like um, I was on one somebody's YouTube page or website, and they were saying we hail the victory. I'm like, what victory, right? I mean,
Mhm.
this is what you're talking about, a 2-week ceasefire, and all they want to do is try to. Hamas can't possibly go for this, right? I mean, I don't. You release the hostages and then they resume the genocide.
And that's why I say that's why I say symbolic gesture, because another part of it is the election, Biden trying to reel back in voters the U.S. gets to get a temporary ceasefire without actually having to technically vote against Israel, which shows you that they're still fully in support of Israel. And the political situation in the United States really is at a point where you might as well go into the ballot box and write yourself in as president, because on both sides you're going to get similar results based upon who these presidents support. They fully support, both presidents fully support Israel.
Yes.
And, whether you get it conservatively or whether you get it liberally, you're going to get an Israeli agenda.
Yeah. And the other thing, I mean, the thing about this speaking out of both sides of their mouth that Biden and Harris are doing is that when they are questioned, when just like Congressman Ro Khanna was questioning the Secretary of Defense, Lord Austin, and they were saying, will you refuse to ship Israel if Israel decides that they're going to invade Rafah anyway? Will you cut off the supply of weapons? I can't answer that. And so none of them will say that if Netanyahu, if you don't allow food to come in so that these starving people can be saved, I'm gonna cut off all of your financial aid and all of your military weapons. They won't say that. They want to play around. They want to play these games around these resolutions and all this kind of stuff, thinking that the the people who are alarmed about the genocide are going to be fooled, by this elementary psychology game that they're playing. So, we just have to keep doing our part, despite, what some of my friends say regarding, well, y'all are not condemning Hamas, and y'all not. You can't start analyzing this situation based on October the 7th.
And Hamas is not doing nothing else. I'm condemning the people who are doing stuff does every day. These Zionists. That's what I'm condemning.
Exactly. That's a good point, brother.
But brothers and sisters, you leave your comments down in the comment section. Was this a victory, or was this more than a symbolic gesture? Once again, until next time, like, comment, subscribe, or hate if you're going to do that. Bibi for Hodier.
Bibi for Hodier.